Hello guys, my name is Rowan Smith and I want to welcome you to the Training for Mountaineering podcast. Now this podcast is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare and conquer your upcoming mountaineering adventure. Once a week, I'm going to be sharing with you in-depth and evidence-backed information around improving your physical performance on the mountain, reducing your likelihood of pain and injury, nutrition for mountaineers, and even a bit of mental strength development, so you can be empowered in your training to give yourself the very best chance of a safe, enjoyable, and successful mountaineering adventure. So now that you know what you're in for, let's get into today's episode. Right, hello guys. Today we're talking all about how a mountaineer can train for loaded descents. Now, there's the common saying in the world of mountaineering, going up is optional, but going down is mandatory. And whenever you're climbing a mountain or a serious elevation, that's always going to be the case. You know, ideally, of course, you're going to get to the top, you're going to get up that, get through the incline, you're going to get through the challenge and get to wherever you're aiming for. But no matter what happens, whether the weather goes bad, whether you succeed, whether you get sick, whether you get injured or whatever it may be, as far as you've gone up, you have to go down. There is just literally no other option. Yeah, sure, there's helicopter evacuations in the worst case, but 90% of the time, 95% of the time, you're going to have to get down under your own 2 feet. And this is really a significant point to be aware of and one not to ignore, because all too often, mountaineers will just focus the majority of their attention on simply getting themselves up the mountain. That's the goal, to get to the top. That's the major challenge. That's where the leg burn's going to happen. And that's where they really put their focus in and into the training, because they know that's what they need to complete. But when it comes to the descent, things tend to fall apart. And people may get to the top of that mountain, they may get to the top of that goal, but on the way down, that's when all the bad stuff happens. That's when foot pain starts coming on. That's when massive knee pain starts coming on. That's where the jelly leg starts happening. And at this point, in this situation, when you're on the downhill, when you're doing the decline, when the trip's over, whether it's been successful or not, that's when the concentration begins to slip. That's when the fatigue is set in, the exhaustion is there, the mental clarity is gone. And that's where mistakes and injuries do happen. So in this situation, a mountaineer really needs to make sure that they're preparing themselves properly for the descents as well. They're not just focusing on the uphills. They're not just doing those, millions of step ups and millions of loaded hill incline walking or whatever it may be. But they're also putting emphasis into the downward portion as well, because as much as it gets neglected, as much as it gets ignored, it is so incredibly important. So today, I just want to go in through a few simple areas which you can really put some focus on into your training to help you on these descents, whether it's to keep yourself safe, to eliminate pain, just to keep you more comfortable, and whatever it may be. So there's going to be a few little points here. It's all really simple stuff, but it's stuff that mountaineers tend to neglect from what I see, and I really do think you should be putting it into action. So first and foremost, there's really 3 things we want to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about strength, we're going to be talking about outdoor conditioning, and we're going to be talking about mobility. Now, in the strength category, as I've said on this podcast a few times, strength training, super beneficial for mountaineers. And when it comes to training for descents, there is a few very key points which really can help you in these particular situations. Now, the first point I want to mention is what's known as eccentric control and eccentric strength. So essentially in your muscles, and when you're performing movements in the gym or outside on the mountain, anytime your muscle contracts, it'll go through one of 2 contractions, or one of 3, but we're only going to talk about 2 today. A concentric muscle contraction is when the muscle is contracting while the muscle is shortening. So that'll be something when you're doing, for example, a squat, when you're at the bottom and you're pushing up and you're pushing against that, the muscles are getting shorter, they're contracting. Or a really simple example, if you're doing a bicep curl, which I hope you're not as a mountaineer, but you've probably done once in your life. And if you're bringing the weight up and the muscle's getting shorter, that's a concentric muscle contraction. Now, an eccentric muscle contraction is the opposite, when the muscle is contracting while the muscle is lengthening. So in that squatting example, it's when you're lowering in the squat and those quadriceps are getting longer and they're lengthening, but they're still contracting. And the same thing with a bicep curl. If you're going from the top down, that's lowering, the muscle's getting longer, and that bicep is still contracting. Now, when you're on your descents on the way down, every single step you take down, that quadricep is going to be going through an eccentric muscle contraction. It's going to be catching yourself and you're going to be lowering yourself down and lowering your force down. It'll lengthen, it'll take pressure, it'll take force, and that's very, very important to train. And what you need to be doing in the situation in the gym when you're doing your strength training, you really need to put a big emphasis into this particular part of your strength training. Now, typically what you'll see for mountaineers in the gym is they'll do lots of step-ups in which they'll just push up and then drop down the bottom, push up, drop down the bottom. They'll do lots of lunges in which they'll drop down to the bottom, then push up, drop down the bottom, push up. And they'll do squats in which they're pretty quick on the way down and then pretty quick on the way up, and they'll just bang out lots and lots of repetitions. And generally those three big exercises, which many, many mountaineers do, they're all really training that concentric portion, which is great, and that's definitely going to help you on the uphills, but there's not enough emphasis on the lowering portion as well. So a really, really easy win for mountaineers in the gym or in their strength training, wherever you're doing it, is just put a bit of extra emphasis into the lowering portion of your exercises. So when you're doing lunges, making sure, as opposed to just dropping straight down to the bottom, taking 2 or 3 seconds of slowly lowering yourself down. When you're doing your squats, taking 3 or 4 seconds of slowly lowering yourself down every single repetition. When you're doing your step-ups, again, take 2 or 3 seconds, slowly lowering yourself down every single repetition if you're not doing millions and millions of repetitions there. Now, this does take concentration. It does take a lot more effort. It will get you tired, and it will be a bit frustrating if you're used to just banging repetition after repetition after repetition out. But it's so crucial for your downhill performance, and it's so crucial to stop those jelly legs, to protect the knees, to protect the feet, and just keep you going down safely on these descents. Now, I'll also mention as well, this type of training probably will give you a bit of muscle soreness. Eccentric contractions do cause a lot of muscle damage, which isn't a bad thing. That's how we get stronger, by causing muscle damage, but you probably will get sore the first couple of times you do that. And I will give you fair warning. You'll get those DOMs coming on, but super important. So have a think about any exercise you're doing for your lower body. Concentrate on that lowering portion. Put 2, 3, 4 seconds or just a little bit extended time. It will make a massive difference. Now, going into strength training a little bit more specifically, when it comes to particular exercises which are going to help you for your loaded descents, there's really 2 big exercises I absolutely love for this. So number 1 is doing pistol squat variations. So we've all seen a pistol squat probably as a mountaineer, 1 foot on the floor, 1 foot out in front of you in the air, and you literally squat down and up, and that's a pistol squat. Now this is fantastic if you can do, and if you can control that lowering portion for 3 or 4 seconds and then shoot up, that's going to be one of the best exercises in the world for your descents. Now obviously that's a pretty tricky move, and not everyone can do that, and I wouldn't say even not many people can do that. So then you want to choose different variations which you may be able to control. So the starting point for that is one that I always get my mountaineers to start on, is the simple step down, in which you're standing up on a step or a box and you're slowly lowering 1 foot down the floor. That's exactly what you need to help with these descents. And as that gets stronger, you lead into other variations, which might be like just the eccentric only component of the pistol squat, in which you're just lowering yourself down onto a bench with one leg, putting 1 foot on the floor, pushing up, putting 2 feet on the floor, pushing up and just lowering down and concentrating on that. You might do pistol squat variations where you're doing it on the box, so up and down on one leg off a box. You might do it with a TRX or a band to assist you, or whatever you may do. You can go online and just look up different pistol squat variations or learn how to do a pistol squat, and there'll be dozens and dozens of exercises in there. But that's exercise number 1. I always get my mountaineers doing some variation of that pretty much through their entire prep, because it is such an amazing exercise. The other exercise that's really going to help you in this situation are forward lunges, and particularly forward lunges with a controlled descent. So a typical lunge, standing 2 feet together, step forward, lower down, little pause, and then come back up to standing. And that's, pretty much what you're doing when it comes to your descents. That's pretty much what your legs are doing as you're stepping down. It's going through the same motions, super specific. So what I like to do here with my mountaineers is start them just doing normal forward lunges with about 3 seconds on the way down, 1 second pause at the bottom, and then pushing up for 1 second. They'll do that initially, then they'll do for a few weeks, then they'll do a few weeks with a bit of weight on them. Then they'll transition to what's called deficit forward lunges, in which they're standing up on a very small box. It might be a few inches, and then they're stepping off that box. So it's a bit of a decline, very similar to what they're doing on descents, and then pushing up. And then we'll put the weight on that and so forth. And that's a super specific exercise you can do for your downhill hiking and your downhill climbing. And I really think you should get around that. So the 2 points on strength training, make sure you're focusing on that eccentric strength, work some pistol squat variations into your training, have a think about those forward lunges, and make sure everything is controlled. Now, beyond strength, there are many other things you can do when it comes to training for your loaded descents. We want to talk about conditioning now, and particularly your outdoor conditioning. Now, typically when people prepare for elevation, prepare for mountaineering trips, the loaded hill climbing is always going to be a staple, whether it's loaded hill climbing, whether it's stair climbing, whatever it may be. Now, for the people who live outdoors, live near mountains, and they can do up and down a mountain with a loaded pack, or up and down a set of stairs outdoors with a loaded pack, that's awesome. That's great. That's going to do you really good, because you're going to be getting that exposure to the elevation, like going up, and also getting that exposure on the way down. Now, where it does get tricky here for people who don't have access to those, and they're doing all their training on a Stairmaster or on a treadmill. Now, in those situations, obviously you can't prepare yourself for downhill hiking on those particular things. So I'd highly recommend, even if you are doing 75% of your elevation training and your muscular endurance training on the Stairmaster or the treadmill, really try to find something with a little bit of elevation at home, which you're going up and down outdoors. So whether it's a set of stairs, whether it's a short hill, whatever it may be. I know a lot of people are challenged in this area, depending on where they live, but you really need to try your best just to find a little bit of stimulus here. You don't have to do the bulk of your training. It might be a pain, it might be a hassle, but you need to incorporate some of it somewhere, because you need to prepare your body for that literal act of stepping on the downhills, exposing the body to those forces and getting yourself ready. So I highly recommend you have a think about that, see where you can incorporate that, and just make sure you're not doing 100% of your training on the Stairmaster, on the treadmill, or even on the step, doing step ups, because step ups aren't going to really prepare you for that either way. And then the other thing you want to consider with your outdoor conditioning as well is try not to do all your conditioning on the cycle and on the bike. Now, I know not many mountaineers are doing all of this on the bike, but I know there are some people. The bike, I love cycling. I love outdoor cycling. I love the trainer for mountaineering prep. I think it's a great addition. I think it's a great use of your time. I think it's a great low impact option of really getting some extra training time in. However, just make sure you're not doing 100% of your conditioning on the cycling, because again, that's not really going to be exposing your legs to that particular load. Even if you're doing hiking and it doesn't have a huge amount of elevation, you're still going to be teaching the body to respond to stimulus as step after step after step after step. It's super necessary for your downhill hiking. So if you are doing most of your conditioning on cycling, please try to get a little bit either running or hiking. And if you're doing your hiking, whack on a loaded pack if you don't have any elevation, just to get some extra load through there. So those are your two main considerations when it comes to your outdoor conditioning, and just making sure your body's getting some exposure to those specific demands. And then the last thing I want to talk about today is the mobility when it comes to this type of thing. And mobility is something that mountaineers always neglect. It's something that's not really talked about. It's something that's not really covered. And it's not really respected as much as it should be. And it's only really used when something goes wrong. When someone has a knee issue or a foot issue or whatever, they go to the physio, they're given stretchers or whatever it may be. But if you're doing a big mountain climb and you've got an extended descent coming up, you really want to make sure you do have enough mobility, particularly in the ankles. So what will happen is if you're taking step after step after step, going downhill where a lot of load's going through your feet, what's going to happen is if the ankles do not have enough range of motion, what is going to happen is that's going to open up more range of motion and cause the body to compensate with more range of motion in the feet and in the knees. Now, both of those joints, the feet and the knees, typically want to stay strong and stable. And if the ankle doesn't have enough movement and the body opens up more movement in the knees or the feet, that's going to lead to pain and discomfort, and it's not a great thing. So a really easy win for any mountaineer who does have an extended descent coming up is just making sure their ankle mobility is up to scratch, making sure they have enough movement there, making sure they're doing regular stretching, foam rolling, and mobility drills in their training, and just making sure they're on top of that. It's a super easy thing to do. It's not incredibly stressful. It's not incredibly painful. It will take some time, but it's not very difficult in regards to training stresses, and it's something I think every mountaineer should be aware of. Make sure your ankle mobility is up to scratch. Make sure you're targeting that in your training, because it will make a massive difference on your descents. So just to sum up what we were talking about today, if you are doing a big mountain climb and you have an extended descent coming up, you need to be preparing for that. Don't neglect it. Don't ignore it. Keep yourself safe, keep yourself comfortable, and make sure you are preparing for this. Work on your eccentric strength, fit in some of that pistol squats or forward lunges. Make sure you're doing outdoor conditioning which has some exposure to those specific stimulus, and make sure you're working on your ankle mobility. Tick off all those boxes, stay consistent with your training, and do that in your prep, and you'll be amazed what a difference that will make to your descents while you're mountaineering. So I hope you got a little bit of value out of this today, guys. I hope you got a little bit of insight into some specific training you can do to prepare yourself for this situation on the mountain. If anyone does have any questions about this, please do reach out to me. Find me on Facebook, add me as a friend, shoot me a message. Always happy to have a chat. But thank you very much for listening today, guys, and we'll talk to you very, very soon. Bye.